Thank you so much for coming to our presentation today. Today we are going to be talking about the art of professionalism. So let me start sharing my screen and we can get into our presentation. With me today is our Marshall student worker, Elena. She will be moderating the chat. So if you do have questions, because could be a small group, please unmute, use the hand raise feature, and I'm happy to help with that and answer any questions throughout the presentation. You can also just pop your questions in the chat. I'll try to read them. And of course, Alina can also bring it to my attention. And so we'll go ahead and get started. We are recording this session today, and it will be posted on the Career Center's Handshake resources for future viewing. So to get started, we are going to do a really quick overview on what professionalism means in a few different formats. So what it is in general, how does it come across when you are dressing up for different work-related or career-related events? How you can convey professionalism through your communication, interviews, and then how can you stand out as a Trojan. So it is a very broad topic, and so it's not going to be a deep dive into a lot of the subject matter. So if you do need additional help, I'll also share some resources and encourage you to schedule appointments with the Career Center, or if you have a career services team at your school, those professionals can help as well. So I'm your presenter, Claudia Aguilar, and I'm a Senior Associate Director working at Marshall. I've been at Marshall for almost 5 years now, and we service the 4,200 Marshall and Leventhal majors. I'm also a USC alum. I graduated from Annenberg back in the 90s, so I've been working in career services type work for almost all of my career. So to start with this session, I want to show you how perception can come across differently just based on something as simple as an image. So imagine if when I introduced myself, instead of this slide, you had this slide. Nothing wrong with it. Still a nice image. This is from a trip that I did, a business trip with Marshall. Don't have a logo. I'm holding up the Fight On sign. So I'm curious to know, what are some thoughts that you have on this presenter slide versus this slide? You can unmute, raise your hand, or pop it in the chat. Any reactions? Which presenter do you want to show up today? This Claudia or this Claudia? Don't be shy. Any thoughts, images, or Fabio, you unmuted. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
I think the first slide that you have right here, it shows a little more professionalism, and it also shows that you took time. You took time to take the photo. You took time to find an appropriate school logo to have that proper branding. And versus the other one, it seems like you just found the last photo that you took of yourself and a quick Google search image.
Absolutely. So thank you for that. And it looks like, that's the same feedback. Some folks are saying, first slide looks professional. And so we're going to define that. Then second slide looks more casual. And absolutely, if I were to be presenting to a more casual environment where I want people to say, look, that person is approachable, I might use this. But even the intent of like the logo, the polish, all of those things make a difference. And so as we're talking about professionalism and how you come across through your social media, presence, mostly LinkedIn or Handshake, think about all of those little details because they do make a difference. I've seen students use photos where they're physically in their car. I can see a seatbelt, it's a selfie, and that is their handshake photo, even LinkedIn photo. we don't want to go that route if we want to make a different impression, especially as we're looking at career opportunities. So I know that we have a variety of students here. This is not just our Marshall students we normally meet with. So I'm curious to know who is in the audience. What are the different schools and or majors and or career interests? So if you can pop some of that in the chat, I'm able to be a little bit more mindful of how I could tailor the different content as we're talking about attire, interview, and communication. So, who do we have in the room? What majors, what areas of career are you interested in? So, okay, communication with marketing, international relations. Okay, Viterbi, very good. So quite a few Annenberg and social media, computer science, chemistry. I love seeing this psychology. Wonderful. So I could see that there's going to be a variety of different professions that people may be interested in pursuing. So this is very helpful. So as we move on into our deck, like what truly is professionalism? We could see the bottom, there's a variety of different careers that folks may be pursuing. But one definition is that professionalism is the ability for you to present yourself with respect, responsibility, and intention, whether you're doing this academically in your actual work environment. Some of us have part-time jobs, right? Or a career setting. And this is all conveyed in how you appear physically, how you communicate, the behavior, and then any follow through. So, would anybody have any thoughts on maybe a different thing, a different definition, or something that maybe have been missed in this definition that we've highlighted here? Any additional things to consider when we're thinking about professionalism? No? Okay, great. So we'll go with this. So if this is what professionalism is defined as, why does it matter? Many people believe that how you present yourself in this professional matter format is going to help you build trust, is going to help with your reputation, and can open opportunities for you. So we can see, you know, intentionally I put a different many photos, people going into science, people going into education, teaching, law, some engineering, right? It doesn't matter your background. When you're entering the workplace, whether it's now, whether you're graduating this year, you're still an intern, you're, you know, doing a master's or a post-grad degree, at some point you do want to create different opportunities for yourself, and you do want to build trust. So it is very important to understand how our choices make a difference in how we are perceived. So the first way that people make decisions on us is appearance, right? There's things we can control, there's things we cannot control. We're going to talk about the things that we can control, because how many of you would like a doctor that came across unclean, disheveled, unsmiling? Who would like this physician? I know I wouldn't, right? So, those are all things that he or she, they are able to control when they show up to work. So, we're going to start there. As you're thinking about your professional appearance, maintaining a polished look is going to be very important in how you make an impression. And the number one way that you can be polished is through your grooming and hygiene. Those things, aside from clothing, really make a difference. Years ago, I worked for a nonprofit, and we would talk to students in college about the 12 by 12 by 12 rule, right? So 12 feet away, 12 inches away, 12 centimeters away, right? Sometimes from afar, you might see somebody and it's like, oh, okay, they look good. And then they get closer and you start to see, oh, that shirt's awfully wrinkled. And then they get closer and maybe there's a smell. Or maybe you can see the dirty fingernails or the ring around the collar, right? The small little stain on the shirt that looks like hasn't been washed in a while. So those are all the things that as a professional we can control. So making sure that no matter how far or close you are, you're coming across in a way that demonstrates care is going to be important. The other thing to consider when you're deciding how to appear is what are the workplace norms, right? In some environments, you might wear a uniform. In others, you might choose whatever it is that you want to wear. But your choice can also help separate you from maybe peers or people that report to you. When I worked at Occidental College, the environment was very relaxed. Although I was a communication major, I've worked in banking before and I've always worked in the business field. So for me, wearing business attire has always felt very natural. I've also noticed that in higher education, when I switched from working in the business world and nonprofit space to higher education, people are more casual. Sometimes they wear jeans or polo shirts or t-shirts from the school, which is fine. My choice is to be more dressed up. And so there's going to come a point in time where maybe there isn't a rule as to how you want to dress or how you should dress, but you make a choice of how you want to show up. I see this in high schools. There's teachers that wear suits, and then there's teachers that wear sweats, Crocs, and t shirts. No right or wrong, they're clean, but think about how you want to connect with whoever it is that you're working with. Do you want to show that you're somebody that can be trusted to go to that next level? Or do you want to blend in with everybody else because everybody's comfortable, right? So those are choices that you can make depending on your profession. Does anybody have questions about how you can come across with attire in the workplace so far? Okay. So, as you're dressing, and I mentioned this earlier, your intention plays a big role in the impression that you're going to make. And I've listed a few different things or events that you might face yourself having to attend that will make you have to think about what you will want to wear. So, what you would wear to an interview might be slightly different than a career fair, right? And I'll give a quick example. Maybe to an interview, if you prefer to wear have a more feminine look, you might choose to wear heels. I would not recommend heels to a career fair unless you're comfortable walking in them, right? Your day to day may be more of a business casual look or casual versus, again, for an interview. Even if you're not going into the business field, you may want to wear a suit and look more polished. If you reach out to a professional or an alum for a coffee chat and it's after hours, it may look a little bit more casual because you're coming from school or maybe you're coming from a part-time job, right? So that will look different. If you're attending a social outing with friends, that's going to look very different than a social outing with your workmates. And of course, if you're going to a conference with work, that also will dictate what you take. I have even found that sometimes if you're traveling to different parts of the country, your attire might look different as well. So I like color. And 3 years ago, I had the privilege to travel to Mexico City with a group of first year students from Marshall for one of their business trips. I'm half Mexican. I know in Mexico, color is something that's very acceptable. So a lot of my business clothing included bright colors, red, blue, green. Then the second year that I traveled with Marshall, I was assigned to go to Japan, Tokyo specifically. Some of the things that I learned about traveling to Japan is that the business culture there is all about being uniform, and that's acceptable and respectable. So, what did that mean? It meant that for me to appear professional in that environment, it required that I change the color choices of what I was taking. So I ended up wearing more blues, uh, grays, blacks, whites. So even small things like that can make a difference when you are choosing the clothing that you wear to different events. The biggest thing to keep in mind is that making sure it's clean is important. And I've seen it where sometimes you're in interview mode and you are have the one or two white shirts. You wear them time after time, but you're like, I only wore it for an hour or I only wore it for a little bit. After some time, there will be, a little bit of dirt that maybe builds on the collar around your sleeves. If it was a hot day, there could be some odors that are attached to your clothing. So just be mindful of that when you are recycling suits or shirts, tops to different interviews, events, even the workplace. Make sure you're ironing it. I know it's not, I hate ironing, but I had years ago a student give a presentation and it didn't look like she took the time to iron the blouse. All I could focus on during the presentation, and she was giving a great presentation, was how wrinkled the blouse appeared. So those details make a difference. And then, of course, nowadays with casual clothes, a lot of thing, looks worn, it's vintage looking, but make sure your clothing doesn't have holes or stains. So that intention really will go a long way in you coming across more professionally. So, does anybody have any questions about attire, what to wear, what not to wear? And again, I do recommend that based on your industry, you do some research. I saw some students here that are fellow Annenberg, students and or alumni or future alumni. Sometimes going into public relations, marketing, communication, the entertainment industry, it is allowed that you wear outfits that are a little bit more unique and creative because you're going into that space. So, whereas in the traditional banking business, we're recommending dark colors for suits or outfits, when you're going into different industries, that might change. So I do recommend that, in having some informational interviews or coffee chats with alumni or professionals, or even looking at a company's social media presence, you can really start to see what is acceptable attire for professionals working in that field. But with that, does anybody have questions? All right, so moving on. Other ways that you might need to wear, dress up is if you're meeting somebody either for an interview or an information session or a coffee chat in person or virtually. So in person, it's pretty easy to make the choice, right? We talked about that. You still want to be very mindful in how you come across virtually. There are some colors that work better on camera than others. You also want to be mindful of your background. So on the image to my left, you could see how I might look at the person in person, how they appear, right, when they're connecting to somebody on camera. But on the other image, it's like, how does that actually come across? So you want to make sure that your lighting looks good, that your background, you don't have anything that stands out. I've been in one-on-one conversations with students where sometimes I see the roommates walk by. Sometimes they have banned posters on their walls with inappropriate language to my taste. So when you are choosing how you choose to appear in person or virtually, also makes a difference. So be mindful of that. And it's definitely okay to wear the yoga pants or the sweats if you're virtual. But I've heard that in the past, companies might have said, oh, I'm curious to see what your outfit looks like. I don't know that they will do that anymore in this day and age, but a few years ago, that was a thing. I think that was a pre-pandemic thing, but those are things to take note of. Sometimes wearing a suit completely, even though nobody will see that you're fully dressed in a suit, can make a difference in the way that you come across and appear on camera. So now that we've talked about the appearance, specifically clothing, attire, we're going to now pivot into professional communication. So your professional communication can be how you communicate, whether you're giving a presentation in class, in the workplace, collaborating with colleagues, going into an interview, or trying to get folks to get on the same page, on a team project. With the career fair for USC coming up in the next week, that's another way that you can really highlight your verbal communication skills. So, the best thing to think about when you are communicating verbally is making sure that you're conveying your ideas clearly. I work a lot with students with interview preparation, and sometimes I see students use filler words. Today, you could see I've slowed down at times when I'm delivering content, and that's because I'm trying to avoid using the uh, or any other type of filler. It takes practice. It doesn't always come natural, but as you prepare, it will allow you to be more intentional in how you can come across when you're meeting an employer or a classmate or giving a presentation. It's okay to be nervous when you're doing a presentation. I know that it is said that public speaking is one of the biggest fears that people have. And nowadays, many people experience anxiety when they know they have to do a presentation or they are scheduled for an interview. But the biggest thing that will help you overcome those nerves is going to be your preparation. Are you doing your research? Are you practicing with a friend, with an advisor from the Career Center, with a family member? So, all of those things make a difference when you're meeting professionals at the career fair. And I'll use that as an example just because, again, it's coming next week and it's a great way for you to get out there and practice those verbal communication skills. Are you making eye contact? Are you smiling? Are you making sure that you're aware of your surroundings and you're not monopolizing the conversation because you might have that one moment with them, but there may be a line behind you. So, are you conscious of that and keeping your questions short so that you can say, thank you for your time. I'm here. Just wanted to say hello. Super interested in your opportunity. I see you have a long line. Is it okay if I ask you a couple of questions, right? So you open up that dialogue, but you don't hog the stage. So keeping those things in mind can definitely make you come across more professional. The other thing is avoiding slang or foul language. And this is probably not something that you would do in a setting like an interview or when you're meeting an employer in an information session or an interview. But I've seen people sometimes put their guard down in public spaces or in the workplace. It's up to you if that's the way that you communicate, but sometimes things like foul language can take away from your credibility, and people will make an opinion about you. So, things to keep in mind as you're going through your professional career. How do you communicate? How do people view you? And are you conveying those ideas clearly at the end of the day is going to be the biggest thing to keep in mind. It is said that most of the communication that happens during interaction with people is those nonverbals. So if you are stating a message, but your nonverbals don't match with that message that you're delivering, that can make a difference in how people receive your message. So, nonverbal communication plays a huge role in how you're perceived as a professional. The number one thing people are going to look at is your body language. If I was giving you this presentation and as I'm speaking, you see me going like this and having my hand on my chin, or perhaps you see just my eyes and not my full face, or I'm not, being monotone and not really smiling and telling you it's so important for you to smile when you give an interview. Doesn't match, right? So your posture makes a difference, the way that you come across, your facial expressions. And I personally have to be very mindful of my expressions because when I don't like something, my eyes immediately speak for me. So I've had to practice making sure that I keep my emotions in check when I don't like something, and maybe changing the way that I communicate those facial expressions. There's some images there, a little fun, but I have seen students that at times in an interview, because the chair's uncomfortable, they may sink too much into it. A few tips that I have is, if you are in an interview, sitting at the very front of the chair, trying to have, straight posture can be very helpful. When you have an interview via Zoom, your eye contact is made by looking at the camera. So if I had students on camera, looking to my right is where I would see all of the little screens. If I was talking to that or looking at myself, I'm not making eye contact. So making eye contact directly into a camera, if you're on Zoom, provides that experience of making eye contact to the person on the other side. And of course, nowadays, now that we've been out of the pandemic for almost 6 years, handshakes are coming back into the mode. So making sure that, you give a good handshake. Practice with your friends. The worst thing you could do is, give just the fingertips handshake. So a few of those things are a little bit more traditional, business related, I'd say, nonverbals. And again, depending on your industry, the profession you're going to go into, some of those are still in play. But those are things that, again, through your conversations with people in your industry, you can get more insight on. So, does anybody have questions on the nonverbals or the verbals when you're communicating, and how it can either help you with your professionalism or take away from your ability to come across as a professional? All right. So, moving along, we'll now talk briefly about how can you exhibit professional conduct during interviews. And just as with your communication, going to career fairs, preparation is always going to be the key. So, with this slide, I'm going to really talk about that interview, during interview, and after interview. So this is where you might have more questions, because although this is not an interview workshop, your professionalism really comes across during those interviews and can be the deal maker or the deal breaker for you. So before your interview, making sure you prepare is so important. Did you research the company, the role? Did you look at the job description that you applied for to understand what they might be asking you? Did you do a quick chat GPT or other AI on what kind of questions can I expect for an interview with this company for this role? you're going to get some great sample questions. And if you have a hard time answering it, if you're okay using AI, you can even engage with the chat and say, what if I answer this? How can I refine this response? So there's great ways that you can prepare if you cannot schedule a one-on-one appointment with a career services professional or meet with a friend. But doing the research really makes a difference. The next step after doing your research is, again, practicing, right? What are those common questions? In some industries, behavioral questions are super common, and a behavioral question is just looking at past behaviors to predict future behaviors. So many of you may already be familiar with using the STAR technique, right? Your situation, your task, your action, your result. So if I were to get a question such as, Claudia, can you give me an example of a time that you were working on a team that wasn't collaborating well together? How did you handle it? Okay, my response is going to follow that pattern, right? So the situation was I was in my internship and my team was tasked uh, with figuring out X. We all had different ideas and nobody was getting on the same page. So, what I decided to do was make this recommendation. Sadly, that conflicted with, which caused some trouble, but in the end, we were able to, get on the same page, submitted the project, and our supervisor was really happy, right? I'm really providing something very basic, but having that type of delivery and being prepared with your different stories can really help you when you're in an interview, because if you're able to communicate clearly with intention, all of a sudden you can stand out as the better candidate. So that's all the pre-work. During your interview, if you're late, you might lose the opportunity right then and there. So that is, in some industries, very, very much the norm. For us with business, we work with students going into banking and consulting, especially in banking. If you're late, that's it. Interview's over. You don't even start the interview process, right? With other industries, there may be more flexibility. So knowing where you're interviewing, where is the parking if you're going in person, how long is the walk from the lot to the location, what floor it's on. So doing that preparation is going to be very important because it shows that you took the time to prepare and you're showing respect for the person's time. While you're in the interview as well, you want to, again, maintain that eye contact, positive body language, ask good questions. You probably want to ensure that you're not rambling on, because that doesn't make you look like somebody that speaks with conviction and I may not want to hire you. So that goes back to that preparation. And then after your interview, sending that follow-up email saying, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed meeting you. I loved learning more about this, and I feel that I would be a great fit, and I'm excited to hear from you on next steps. Super simple, but showing that gratitude can really make a difference. The last time I heard a statistic was that only, I believe it was about 30% of applicants sent thank you notes. Back in my day, it used to be a handwritten thank you letter or, a card. We discouraged the cards because they didn't seem as professional, but depending on the industry, a thank you card was acceptable. Nowadays, companies are making decisions so quickly that we do recommend a thank you email within 24 hours, but sometimes if you know a decision's happening very quickly, maybe within 2 hours of your interview. So that's where it's important to get the names and the emails of the people that you interviewed with. And if you can't get it for the hiring managers because maybe you worked with a recruiter, find the recruiter's contact information, say, can you share this with the team, or provide their emails. That's a good way to show your appreciation. So again, during your interview, there's many ways that you can come across professionally, you know, preparing ahead of time, engaging in a positive way, and then following up with a thank you. Of course, dressing appropriately, all of those things allow you to come across as a professional. So, how do you stand out? Um, we talked about intentionality, so that's going to be really important. Being very clear when you communicate can also make a difference with you standing out. I've interviewed people for student roles, for full time roles, and I remember I'll never forget the person that I asked, tell me about yourself, and gave me a 10-minute long answer. No joke, I counted because it was that long. Needless to say, I think we asked one other question just so that it wouldn't be weird, but that was an instant no. So, how you communicate in your interview can be the deal maker instantly. And usually it's preparing for the tell me about yourself in the beginning that really sets the tone for the rest of the interview. You also want to show reliability. So if you are follow asked if somebody asks you to follow through. So for example, I rarely connect people in my LinkedIn network unless I know somebody. I'll rarely make an introduction. Why? Because those are my relationships, and I've had times when I've had a student reach out to a professional and then the student doesn't follow through, and the professional's like, I waited and they never emailed me, right? Don't want that. So if a professor, if a colleague, if your supervisor is giving you their contact, a contact, and allowing you to connect with their network, make sure that you are following through, make sure you're emailing in a timely manner. And if you can't, if you get an interview request and it's just a bad week, a simple note to the recruiter saying, thank you so much. I'm so excited to interview. However, this is a really bad week, or the options you gave me because I have some exams, or there's some alternate times, instead of ignoring the email and then saying later, oh, I'm sorry I didn't email you. It was just a bad week, right? So that's where your communication comes in. Being very clear as to where you are, what you need, and maybe asking for an accommodation will be better than saying, oops, sorry, didn't mean to ignore you, but I was really busy. Does not come across positively, especially when you're recruiting. Other things that you can do is ask thoughtful questions, right? We already talked about the thank you notes, but if you're in an interview or if you're attending the career fair and you show up to somebody's booth and you're like, so what do you do here? That doesn't make me feel very good if I'm the employer. And I've been in that place because I worked for a nonprofit called Inroads, and everybody was like, "Oh, Inroads, like, are you an engineering company?" And it was like, "No, we provide opportunities to college students for corporate internships." But it was one of my biggest I guess pet peeves when people said, "So what do you do?" So take the time. We all have our devices nowadays. We can all quickly like do a search on what does that company do? What jobs do they have? So that when you show up to the person's booth, you can say, hi, my name is Claudia. It's really nice to meet you. I saw online that your company has opportunities in education, and I was wondering, are you open to majors of all backgrounds? Very different question than, so, do you hire engineers, right? So, the way that you communicate your questions, how you show up, can demonstrate that professionalism to employers and even in the workplace. And then finally, even when you don't know, there is that sense of the fake it till you make it. Never want to come across as arrogant or cocky, but by being respectful and kind, that goes a long way. My first job when I graduated from USC, I was a recruiter for tellers for Bank of America. And I remember people would come in person to our offices to interview. My front desk person, she was my right hand because I always asked Cindy, Cindy, how did they treat you? Were they nice? What were they doing while they were waiting for their interview? Were they on their phone? Or were they doing something weird, right? So there's always nowadays, there's cameras everywhere. From the moment you park your car in that corporate parking lot to that front desk area where you might be seating, the cameras are there. So keep that in mind and how you engage, who you say hello to, who you smile to. There's other things that people might make judgments on based on, if you're on your phone and they could see you scrolling. So all of those things make a difference in how you appear. So you want to stand out for the good qualities, not those that may not be an indicator of who you are as a person, but people will make judgment on just based on their personal biases. And again, I'm talking about all these things that you can control, not things that you can't, because sadly, in this day and age, there may be times that people judge you or make biased decisions. And if it's beyond your control, obviously, you just have to let that go. So, those are some tips on standing out. I do want to note that I'm as a very proud Trojan. So we do want to protect our Trojan brand and how we show up, what we do, making sure we're not, continuing to interview after we've accepted an offer. All of those play a role in how you come across in the corporate world or whatever industry that you're pursuing. So, there are a few resources for you to help you in your journey. That's going to be post grad, whether again you go into teaching, science, psychology, medicine, law, business, whatever you're planning to pursue, being a creative as a musician, artist, whatever it is. Our main career center is open for you Monday through Friday. You can make appointments with the team on Handshake, and there's also different resources in Handshake. So if you go into Handshake and you click on Career Center, the resource library has all the different resources available to you. Some of the schools like Annenberg, Viterbi, Marshall, Leventhal also have a career services team that if they do have appointments and events, you can access those on Handshake. As you know, for this next year, USC also has access to our EDU ChatGPT 5.2, which I'm guessing will increase, in the versions. But that is an internal tool. It doesn't pull from public information. So if you're hesitant about putting content in there, that could be a way for you to get some intel on preparing for interviews and or practicing your responses. And then one of the tools that's really helpful that the main career center offers is called Big Interview. That tool actually records you so that you could see how you come across on camera, because how you come across on camera will be how you might come across in person. But it could give you like some random questions that you can answer, and then you could record yourself so that you could see what you can do to improve. You can also practice with your family, with your friends. Again, there's sample questions that you can generate using Google if you're not into using AI, and all of those things can help you come across more prepared. So that concludes the presentation for today. I know this was a very broad overview, but hopefully it was helpful with your journey. And now I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have on any of the content that I've shared. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and please feel free to come on camera or use your hand raise feature. Thank you for that applause. I appreciate it. Thank you. Does anybody questions? Let's see. Oh, good question. Is it appropriate to send a thank you note after a phone screen? Absolutely. So usually the person who's doing your phone screen may be the person that you are going to that emailed you to set it up. So Absolutely, any point of contact by phone, by Zoom, is appropriate. The only time that it may be a little bit weird is if you did a higher view, because that's a recorded interview. So I don't think that you would need to send a thank you to the recruiter saying, "Thank you for sending me the higher view interview." I mean, you can show that gratitude, but that's not a formal interview. So, but a phone screen absolutely appropriate to say thank you so much. It was you made me feel really comfortable, appreciated learning more about the role, and excited to learn more about next steps. Okay, next question. What are good things to include in the thank you? Great question, Amina. So long time ago, I used to tell students, if you had a really tough question and you didn't know the answer, if you send a thank you, you should go ahead and say, I know I messed up on this question, but if I had the chance to answer it again. And then I heard a different perspective. Somebody that I worked with said, the interview is over. This is an opportunity to just show gratitude. And I reflected and said, absolutely. Don't use the thank you for an opportunity to keep selling yourself. You had that chance. You sell yourself by showing the gratitude and maybe highlighting something you learned about the role or maybe the people that you engaged with that makes you excited about the job or the opportunity. So, Claudia, thank you so much for the opportunity to interview with me today. Although I was nervous, you made me feel very comfortable, and I'm super excited to learn more about company XYZ. I'm also excited about the long-term opportunities with the company, especially with what it's doing in this space. Sincerely, Claudia, right? So something like that, 2 to 3 sentences, very simple, is a great format for a thank you note, an email specifically. So great question. Thank you. Other questions? You're welcome. Anybody else have any other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and attention. It was a pleasure presenting to a larger USC population. Like I said, I'm a big Trojan. If I see you on the street with your Trojan gear, I'll give you a fight on. So I appreciate that you joined the session. Hopefully, you learned a lot and it was helpful. And best wishes on your journey. Don't forget to go to the career fair, attend Trojan Talks, engage with your career services team. We really are here to help you. And I appreciate your time this evening. Have a good one.